Welcome everyone tonight to this event. My name is Melanie Brooks and I am the audience coordinator at the BDN. Thank you for joining us tonight as we talk about voting in Maine. And I'd like to welcome my colleague, BDN politics editor, Michael Shepard, as my co-host tonight. He has some questions for our special guests and then we will get to your questions. We want to hear what you want to know. So I want to begin by thanking our event partner tonight, Harvard Pilgrim Healthcare, and our subscribers. Thanks to this support, we're able to offer these informative events free to the public. So any of you here that are subscribers, thank you so much. We appreciate your support. Let's keep ourselves muted for now so that we can hear Mike and we can hear our special guests. Admitting a couple more people. Before we get started, I'm going to take a second to introduce our guest speakers who I am very happy to have here tonight. Lisa Goodwin is the City Clerk and Registrar of Voters for the City of Bangor. She has served in this role since April of 2012. Prior to her service in Bangor, she served as Town Clerk and Registrar of Voters for the Town of Lincoln, and that was from 1991 to 2008. And she served as Lincoln's town manager from 2008 to 2012. Lisa is a lifetime certified clerk of Maine and has received her Master Municipal Clerk certification from the International Institute of Municipal Clerks. Thank you, Lisa, for being here. Our next speaker is Jacob Gran. He is the Town Clerk and Registrar of Voters for the town of Bucksport. Prior to this role, he worked as the Deputy Town Clerk and Registrar of Voters for the town of Winterport. He and his wife, Mackenzie, live in Winterport with their son, Israel. And outside of his municipal work, Jacob serves as pastor of Starting Point Church in Bucksport. Welcome, Jacob. And last but not least, Darci Wheeler. She came to the city of Bath in 2017 after 18 years in business management. In the past 3 years, Wheeler has transitioned from treasurer's clerk to deputy city clerk to city clerk and is currently working on becoming a certified clerk. She enjoys working with people and strives to make the clerk's office a welcoming space. Thank you, Lisa, Jacob, and Darci for joining us tonight. I know this is a very busy time for city and town clerks, and I really appreciate your willingness to be here tonight. So thank you. I am going to pass the baton over to Mike Shepard. He has some questions that he would like to ask our guests, and then we will hop in with your questions. Please, if you have a question, send it in the chat box. I'm going to send everybody a message right now to show you where it is. There's a little bubble at the bottom of your screen that says chat. Just send in your question and we will get to it a little bit later in the event. So Mike, take it away.
Well, thank you, everyone, and thank you to everyone watching, and always a thank you to clerks. We bother them so much that I'm surprised these three agreed to come on with us tonight, but it's a great pleasure to have them. So I'm not going to take too much time with my questions. I think we have, about 3 pages of questions down here. So we'll try to get to as many of them as we can. I just wanted to start off, before I got on this meeting, I sent through a story basically saying that already 27,000 people have cast their votes as of 3 p.m. today by absentee ballots. So it's about 3% of the people who voted in the 2016 election. So we're already going here. And I just wanted to ask each of the clerks, what are you worried about right now? What's sort of making you nervous about this election, or what's different, and how is it sort of changing the way you do your job on the approach to the election? I see you guys in this order, Jacob, Lisa, Darci, so I'll just go around the horn to Jacob first.
Well, I don't know. Can't say that there's anything I'm necessarily worried about. I guess I worry more about some of the misinformation that residents are dealing with right now. I think that's the biggest challenge that our municipality is facing, just an influx. And I think most town and city clerks are just so many phone calls and so many emails from residents who are getting letters from organizations, giving them information that's partially or just completely false. So that's I would say the biggest struggle, and this has been I can't remember this happening as much in any other election that I've ever worked under. So that's what I would say to that.
I definitely want to return to that, but we'll go to Lisa next.
Yeah, I worry about the same things that Jacob is worrying about. I mean, we've been fielding calls, well, for months now from worried voters. They're worried about their ballots being, counted to make sure, what do they need to do to make sure that their ballot is cast and counted. They're worried about the absentee process. They're worried about fraud. They're worried about all those things. Personally, I worry about the whole process from start to finish to make sure that everything is done according to law and that everyone has that opportunity to vote if they want to vote. And I worry about the COVID aspect of it because it makes everything different. We will have long lines on election day. In Bangor, we are splitting up into two different sections at the Cross Center, but there's still going to be long lines because we have social distancing that we have to take into consideration. You can only have 50 people in a room. That hasn't changed since July. So we still have those problems that we need to worry about. We need to worry about, can we get everybody in and out in a timely fashion? I'm hoping that everybody studies ballots ahead of time so that they know what they're doing when they get to the voting booth and they don't have to think about it. They already know, because we really need to get people in and out quickly, because it probably 25 to 30 people are going to be the max that we can have in the voting area at one time. So those are the things I worry about.
And Darci.
I echo both Jacob and Lisa with those aspects. This being my first general election, I've had a couple smaller elections before this, but this being my first one, I really have nothing to compare it to. So with the COVID aspect, I know that we have those precautions and we will follow those. And I just want to make sure that everybody is, my concern is making sure that the residents realize that that is my first concern. And I want to make sure that they feel safe during that time. With that being said, I think anybody that had come to the polls in July saw that what we put in place, and I've heard really good things about that. And I'm just hoping that that good news spreads versus the concern on the other aspect with the duplicate ballots and such that we've been dealing with.
You talked about misinformation, Jacob, and I think the other two clerks here have seen that as well to a certain degree. What's particularly egregious about this misinformation, or what have you encountered, I guess, in practical terms that you want people to know about, and or to sort of debunk that stuff?
Well, a big phone call that I was getting is that voters had received letters from an organization saying that somebody in their household wasn't registered to vote. I don't know if any of the other clerks, they've shaken their heads. And I think in every case, the individual who was calling in, their family member was in fact registered to vote. So that was, they were immediately very concerned. Anybody would be concerned if you received a letter saying that you aren't registered to vote and you voted every year for the past however many years.
Right.
So that's been a big one. That's the first one that comes to my mind.
Mm-hmm. Anything else from the others?
That we did just recently, there's been another one with the stamps. There were stamps being sent out, and it had said that your ballot hasn't been received yet. Well, I hadn't even mailed them at that time, and that ended up being cross information, and everybody was calling saying, I didn't get my ballot. Obviously, I'm supposed to have it by now. You sent me stamps, and I'm like, it wasn't us that sent the stamps. It's a lot of that kind of miscommunication.
Mm-hmm.
Misinformation.
We might add that oftentimes the town's return address is on these letters that are being sent to residents, and so it makes the residents think as though it's the town or the city that's sending them out, and so they're immediately wondering, why is the town doing such a thing when it's actually coming from this either group or party.
Right. Now, I just wanted to get a quick update from all of you on the progress you've made. So we had a record amount of requests. Of course, we're going to shatter any previous record. But how? So if you requested a ballot before the election now, would people have had it last week? It was Friday, I believe, when absentee ballots technically became available. So if you requested it last week, when should you kind of expect that from at least your respective, cities?
If they requested last week?
Yeah, or up until last week, yeah.
Yeah, well, most of ours have been filled. We still have, because we had almost 8,000 absentees to fill and out, and the last of those went out today. So before the end of this week, any requests for last week will be filled, most definitely, yeah.
I've been telling most of my residents that if you've requested it up until this past weekend, that they all went out yesterday and that they should see it by the end of the week.
We fulfilled we all came in on Friday and mailed out 650 absentee ballots. We had fulfilled everything that we had gotten up until that point, and all of our voters started receiving their ballots mostly on Monday.
And can you all go through, I think just for everyone's information, the chain of custody for these ballots? You'll be dealing with many more of them. So when they come in, where do they go? Where are they kept? When will you start processing them in your different places?
You want to go first, anyone?
Oh, so I'll start in the order again, Jacob.
So when they come into our office, they inevitably are given to me basically, and it's logged into our system. And it's the ballots are filed alphabetically, and at the end of the night, those are put into a vault, and we will start, quote unquote, processing them the Friday before the election, but results aren't tabulated until election night. That's how we're going to be doing it for this election.
Mm-hmm. Lisa?
When they come into the city hall, they come to the clerks at the window, and we take the applications that were submitted for those, and we have to match them up, and we enter the information into the state's program. If there are any discrepancies in the ballot, which means maybe they forgot to sign their ballot, we're going to immediately contact that voter to get that remedied so that we can fix their ballot so that they can cast that ballot. Once we have probably about 100 of them, what we do is what we call a batch, and we run a report. We match everything up to make sure that all of those ballots are correctly entered into the CBR program, the state's program, and then that report stays with that. We bundle them up, box them, put them in the safe, and that's where they stay until we batch them and take them and process them. And that's going to happen at the Cross Center for us. And we're going to start the Wednesday before. We'll be doing Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. We're hoping to have the bulk of it done so that any that come in after Friday will be done on election day. And of course, like Jacob, nobody runs totals until 8 o'clock on election night.
Right. And are you counting before election night, or not? You're just processing as well.
We all just process.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And Darci, what about you in terms of chain of custody?
Same idea as both Jacob and Lisa. They come into the clerk's office. We process that. We look at them. We make sure that everything's signed. Everything looks like it's supposed to. Nothing's open, partially open, anything like that. We put it into the state site, CBR. We put them in boxes. Make sure they're all alphabetical. Run the batches. Make sure everything's lined up. Looks good. Tape that box up. Label it batch 1 of so many. Put it in the vault. It will stay there until early processing, and that will be for us in the city of Bath. Will be on Saturday and Sunday before the election. From there, anything that hasn't come in by Friday evening, the rest of those will be processed on election day, where the totals will be tallied at the end of election night.
When someone, let me just get to some reader questions first in the chat function here. Hold on. Yes, we've got some we've got one question here on removal of registered voters, and I think they're talking about the rolls. Has there been any wholesale removal of registered voters? Is how William worded the question. But can you talk about removal of the rolls? Someone want to take that?
I can take that.
Yeah.
There's no removal like that.
Right.
What I'm interpreting that to be. You can't take a voter off the rolls unless they've given you something that they've signed saying they want to be removed from the rolls. You get something from another community that said that they have registered in that community, or you get a death notice that they have passed away. So there's no blanket, okay, we're going to target all these people and remove them from our list. We can't do that. That's against the law for us to do that.
Right, and those are the only ways people are ever removed from the rolls.
Correct. Yeah,
Right.
we have to have contact with that voter to remove them from the list.
Mm-hmm. Talk about results collection too, real quick, because we're going to be on election nights. Just so everyone knows, clerks report the results basically to news outlets, and that's how you sort of figure out who wins the election. A lot of states have their own central registries that do that, but we actually do that in Maine. It's kind of an odd system. Are you expecting particular delays in counting results in your areas, or when do you think you'll be done? I guess that's always my question, right? When will you be done? But I guess statewide, it's a concern if these results are hanging out there longer and longer and longer. So what are you expecting in your town?
I'm not expecting anything different than what a normal election is. I think we should be able to go right through the process, barring, an electrical disaster or something like that. But other than that, if the power goes out or something like that beyond our control, I think everything should be right on target. I do have a municipal election also, and one of those will be a hand counted ballot. So that will take us a little more time. The tabulators will still run at the time that they're going to run, and then we'll just do the results after that. Getting it to you folks when I get back to the office, that might be a little more time consuming. Because I've got to actually physically pack stuff up to get it out of the school so that I can get there.
Right.
I agree with Darci. I'm really not anticipating a delay in our results. I also have a municipal election in November, but we use a tabulator for that election as well. So
Easy.
Tabulators. I came from a hand town count, and so I know the joy of being a hand count town, or the lack thereof, I should say. And so I think that's where, in my opinion, where most of any delay will come will just be from the municipalities who are going to be seeing such a high voter turnout, who will be hand counting the ballots.
Right.
No delay from us.
Well, I'm going to disagree just a little bit. I think in Bangor, it'll take a little bit longer. If we see absentee ballots being returned later rather than sooner, we can't, if they come in on election day, we can't just process those through. We have to go to the check-in lines for each of those voters and have them checked off the voting list to make sure that they did not come in on election day and vote. So that's how you make sure that somebody isn't casting a vote twice. So if people wait till the last day to turn that ballot in, it could take longer, like it did in July for us. We had hundreds that we had to do at 8 o'clock at night. So that's a little bit longer. So if that occurs again in November, that will take a little bit longer. And Bangor also has 16 more tabulators that we're adding to our tabulators this year. So that in itself is going to take longer to print all of those all of those totals from each of the machines, tally them, and add everything together. So that will take a little bit longer, but I'm not seeing anything like undue. I mean, it's going to take a couple more hours probably than we normally take.
Mm-hmm. And across the state, that should vary, depending on, what your logistical challenges are, right? I mean, you have two smaller places here saying it shouldn't take any longer. Bangor is a little bigger. You might expect it, to take a shorter amount of time, but you have all that logistical stuff there. And then you have the hand count towns. So it seems to be hitting different towns differently, just by virtue of.
Lisa has literally 10 times more ballot truly than we have. So it's naturally, she deserves about 3 years off after this election. I don't know
I'll take
how
it.
the large city clerks do it. I really don't. It's amazing to me. So there is a big difference, absolutely.
So to everybody listening, if you want to be nice to your clerks, you get your ballot in early, right? That's the
Yes.
yes. You don't worry about it, and they don't worry about it that day. The thing
If
you
you
fear
want your
most,
results sooner.
right? Hey, I do. So please do that, everybody. Want to go to some questions down here in we have a document that we've been collecting from. I'm just going through.
I can hop in and help
Yeah.
you out with that, Mike. There were some questions from Gretchen about ranked choice voting. Gretchen saw on Facebook that it is okay to fill in the same person for all their choices, and your vote will not be disqualified for ranked choice voting. Is this correct? And maybe you could take this opportunity to talk a little bit about how to vote with ranked choice voting.
It's all you, Lisa.
You want me to do it?
Yeah.
Oh, thanks. Okay, so yes, you can vote for one person straight across the ticket on that. And your person stays in the race as long as they're on the top. So
Yep.
if your person is the greatest vote getter and they're eliminating, then all your votes are going to be there, because it's the number one vote is the number one vote. But if your person is on the bottom, then your vote's going to be gone. I guess that's the easiest way to explain that. I'm not sure if it really answers the question. Ranked choice is, you start with your candidates, and then the person with the fewer votes, they're the first one eliminated from the race. So then they take all those votes that were cast for that person that was eliminated, they look at their second choice on their ballot, and that is distributed to the remaining candidates. So if your candidate is the one that's on the bottom and you voted for that person all the way across, you're done, because there's no place to distribute because your candidate is gone.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, it doesn't matter if your first choice is John Brown and you put him as your first choice, or if you put John Brown for every one of your choices, 1, 2, 3, 4, it's the same.
Right. When John is eliminated, John is eliminated. So, if you had voted for, say you voted for John for everything except for the last one, and then you voted for the number one candidate, it will go that route. But when John's gone, he's gone.
Right, and I think there are two ways to mark the ballot like that. You could, but if you want to choose one candidate, you can just choose that one candidate.
Correct.
But your ballot will also be accepted if you choose your candidate 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah. They're both valid. I do believe Ward in the chat function says that the instruction on the ballot says fill in no more than one oval for each candidate or column, but that doesn't mean your ballot will be thrown out. There are two equally valid ways to mark it.
If you fill in 2 in the same column, that is an overvote.
And that's a problem.
That will disqualify you. And if you're voting absentee, you're not going to know because it's going to be accepted that way. But if you were voting in person and you filled in 2 ovals, it would tell you that you have made an overvote.
Right.
And it gives you that opportunity to fix your ballot.
Right. I mean, that would be like voting for John Smith and a second candidate, right, on the first round, and nobody could tell whether you were voting for one or the other.
Correct.
So it's a mistake.
Yeah.
In terms of the problems with absentee ballots, I think the biggest problem usually is that someone just doesn't sign the envelope or something like that. What are you seeing? Are you seeing any difference in that so far?
Well, we haven't really got many ballots back. We've only got a couple of hundred back. Yeah. What we do in Bangor is we go an extra step and put a little sign here sticker right beside the signature. And that has helped us immensely over the last couple of years, because we used to have a lot of ballots that came back unsigned, but we get 1 or 2 now. So most of the time they are signed. It really does help us.
Do something similar. We highlight that area and then we put in instruction enclosure inside it that also has highlight your signature, and we put that in there like 2 or 3 times, make sure it's signed. The good thing this year about the absentee request forms is it actually has not only a phone number, but also an email address. A lot of times people will put down a home number that they never really answer anymore. And at least we can email them to let them know that they will be getting another ballot, you know, sent to them because their ballot wasn't signed.
Mm-hmm. And the Secretary of State has launched a way to track your ballot now as well. You just type in your address and your name, and you can check that out on the Secretary of State's website. We'll provide a link to that. I'll dig it up in just a second. Yeah, that actually Will just put it in the tracker in the chat function for us. So thank you, Will, doing my job for me. Are you, a question from Paul in the chat function is that, are you expecting an increased number of poll watchers, and how will that be handled in these spaces where, you know, we're going to be trying to keep as many people out of them as possible? You know, is that causing challenges with people who want to get signatures for things, people who want to, you know, watch what's going on? How is that going to be handled? Maybe we'll start in Bangor because you're the big one here.
Yeah, the state has given us direction on that we can allow 1 poll watcher from each party inside. Of course, for every poll watcher that's in there, that's 1 voter that can't come in. So we're hoping that the poll watchers will, you know, let us just do the job and trust in what we are trained to do. But, you know, there is a spot for them if they want to come in. The petitioners are going to have to be outside. They're not going to be able to be in the building, so they're going to have to be outside at the exits for this election, which is different than normally inside with tables.
I imagine you're seeing fewer of them make requests so far, or maybe you don't know yet.
I've had 1 person request to be a petitioner.
Yeah.
I haven't heard from the poll watchers, but I do expect that we will have poll watchers. We normally do. So it's, you know.
Old hat. Yeah.
Yeah, in Bangor it'll be hard because when we vote in the arena, you know, people like to come and sit and watch. Well, they're not gonna be able to do that this time. They're gonna have to vote and leave because we just we have 50 people in there. So that will be different for them.
Yeah. What about in the smaller towns, Jacob?
I second what Lisa has said regarding the poll watchers. I haven't had anybody contact us. I've had 1 petitioner who has requested, and same thing as Bangor, she actually is anticipating that she'll be outside. So it will be interesting, you know, for the poll watchers to have them in a place where they can still keep that 6 feet of social distance. It would just be interesting to see how the logistics of things work out, I guess.
And Darci?
Yes, I have space for the poll workers. You know, I've taken that into consideration with my numbers. Fortunately, here in Bath, I've had a lot of people come forward to be election workers, and I've had to turn away so many people, and I feel bad for that because I'd love to bring them on since they want to work and train them, but I can't have those people in there because it's not fair to the voter, and I want to be able to get as many voters in and out as possible on that day. So I've had to turn away a lot of people that really wanted to learn how the process worked. And unfortunately, that's just what has to happen in order to have petitioners and have the poll watchers and the voters come through and be safe and following the recommendations for distancing.
Mm-hmm.
From some of the emails that I received before this event, people seemed very nervous about making a mistake on their ballot. Not signing it or just not doing it right and not having their vote counted. So I'm wondering how each of you are handling if some ballot comes in without a signature or something is incorrect. How are you immediately sending out a new ballot to these people? Are you calling them? Are you emailing them? How are you letting them know that an error was made?
In my case, I would say almost every time a phone call solves the problem. You know, mind you, I'm a smaller town. We don't get an awful lot of those, but usually a phone call to the individual will solve the problem for us. And as Darci said, it's nice to be able to have their email address on the application now as well. So that's how we usually handle it and solve it.
Yep, same here. Same here. We do the same thing. You know, I have a few more voters than Jacob does, but not to the extent that Lisa does. And so we can make those calls, and it all depends on how close we are to the election as well. You know, if we're out a few weeks like we are right now, I could call them and they could have time for me to send them a ballot if that's what needs to happen. If we get closer to the election, if they can come in, we'll take care of it that way. We'll find a way to make sure that they get their ballot, that it's signed, that they voted. If there's a mistake or anything like that, if they messed up their ballot, they could contact us and I'll make sure that they get another ballot.
Yeah, that's the same way in Bangor. We call them. We're not so big that we can't call everybody, and we do.
Another question that we had come in from an email before was from Helen. Are you, clerks are obviously busy right now, as you all are. Are you finding it difficult to have the capacity to do everything that you need to do in a day to get the job done? And how are you handling that?
I'd like to go on that one.
Well, I know that, Lisa, you said you've been working weekends, so why don't you start?
Yeah, I've been working weekends since August. And there's just not enough time in the day. And I go home every night and I work till 9, whatever it takes to get the work done. The absentees have been pouring in for months and you have to put the time in to do it. We don't have a lot of space here to get everything done. So we can't bring in a whole army of people to get things done because we're in a time of COVID and we have to social distance, and there's only so many people we can fit in here. We've brought in as many as we can. I have, for the people that are setting up my election workers, they're working from home. We're trying to do everything we can to get the work done. We'll get it done. I know we will. And next week we move to the Cross Center and we'll have a lot more space so we can have more people to help us get everything. So I'm not worried about getting it done. It's just the amount of energy that it takes to get it done.
How about you, Darci? How have you been handling the extra?
Well, we've actually expanded. We're not just in our office. We're actually down in the basement conference room, which is actually where I'm set up right now. This is where I've been working my days with 4 other election workers because I can space out down here. And we've been doing our absentee in-person voting down in the basement instead of up in our office. We can spread out a little bit further. It makes it a little more manageable with the people that I have. And then the office upstairs can field any of the phone calls. And then it takes away from the listening to the phone calls while you're trying to manage the people voting at the same time. So I found that this has been working good so far. It's been a steady flow, but not unmanageable by any distance. Unlike Lisa, I haven't been working weekends since August, but I did start working weekends this past weekend and probably will till after the election.
I'm not, I've been able to be on the golf course for several weekends, thankfully. I haven't been like Lisa, but our office is closed on Fridays. And so I've been coming in on a couple of Fridays to accomplish something needed. And our office staff came in this past Friday to get that first big batch of absentee ballots out. For me, I think, for me personally, our busy season is just starting now that we have absentee ballots. We have the ballots in house, you know, with voters voting in person. I know that we'll get all of the absentee voting, everything election related will get done, absolutely. Some of our other responsibilities as town and city clerks, for me anyways, it's kind of put on the back burner right now because the past couple of days with the start of in-person absentee voting, that's really all that I've done all day. I haven't been able to get some of the day-to-day stuff done, but that's how it is this time of year.
We have a question from Gretchen in the chat. She hasn't received her mail-in absentee ballot yet. Do any of you have one to show what it looks like when you receive it? I have one in my kitchen.
I was gonna say,
Okay.
you got one right there, Lisa. Good.
So if you haven't
a long
received it yet,
envelope.
that's what you look for. It's a long envelope. It's oversized, I believe. Can't miss it.
Says election mail right on it.
And if you send back all your ballots, it takes 2 stamps. Remember that to get that back to your town. That's why I heard the Maine Democratic Party was sending out 2 stamps to a lot of voters, and I think someone referenced that earlier. But there's creative ways that people are trying to get that done. And another question from Austin over there is that about paper ballots. I think we've heard a lot about election security, of course, over the last few years, and I think people are heartened when they figure out that Maine is a pretty low tech state. I'm sure everyone here likes the paper ballot system, and a lot of people, we've heard a lot about election security, and it seems like paper ballots are kind of the way to go, and Maine is ahead of the curve there. Looks like you're all nodding.
Yes.
Ahead of the curve or behind it, right?
Right,
Putting it
behind it in a good way.
In a good way, yes. Yeah, I wouldn't want to do an election without those paper ballots, because that's the proof. That's the proof of what happened. You can go back and recreate with that paper. You can't if everything is electronic.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say that one thing that I've always admired about Maine is that our tabulators are not hooked up to the internet.
Right.
That way, there's no possibility of hacking, so to speak. And what I would say about paper ballots, on a different note, is my first municipal election in Bucksport. It was a very, very highly contested race, and it came back that one individual had won by 1 vote. 1 vote. And naturally, the opposing candidate wanted a recount, obviously. So we did a recount. We hand counted the ballots after they had been tabulated through the tabulating machines, and we came up with the same exact result that was tabulated on election night. So it just goes to show you, the many hours and all the work that our town and city clerks do, and the trust that we put in the tabulating machines. It's understandable why we do so. So that was I was surprised all my hair didn't fall out as a result of that.
Your vote does count.
And most people don't realize that when we run those tabulating numbers, those are just the preliminary numbers. There's also a whole other paperwork aspect that we do to make sure that we have everything, all our I's are dotted and our T's are crossed, so that we can track all of that.
A question for people who want to vote early. Can you share with us how your towns are handling early voting, and can people take their absentee ballot that they were mailed and bring it and use it for early voting? Lisa, do you want to start?
I can start. We have early voting at the Cross Center. I know it's early in-person absentee voting is what it is, but we've whittled it down to early voting. It's the same ballot at early voting as it is the one that you get in the mail. They're identical. They're the same as the ones that are on election day, except they're folded. That's the only difference in those ballots. That's the only thing that's different. And with your absentee or early voting ballot, you put it in an envelope and seal it up until it's time for us to put it in the machine for you. They can bring their ballot in. Yes, they can. There's an application that has to go with that, because you have to, the chain of custody of that ballot has to be documented. So if they come to early voting, luckily our office, the clerk's office, is going to the Cross Center too. So we will be right there. We will have all of those applications on hand, so we can match that up with the ballot they were mailed. So they can come in and they can cast their ballot there and give it to us. That's fine.
And what Lisa said, basically the same process. They can come into the town office. We have booths set up here, and it's fairly simple. We check their names to the CDR, the state system, and they can vote right here. So it's a pretty good process.
Yep, same here. Like I said, I'm actually set up, I'm talking from that room right now. And our room is, we're set up for 6 voters to come in at a time to, they can either vote here or they could take out their ballot with them by filling out that form that Lisa's talking about, which is the same request form that if you had called earlier for us to mail it to you.
Martha wants to know, she will be voting in Bangor. And she wants to know, with early voting, can she put her ballot directly into the machine at the Cross Center after she votes early?
No, because it's absentee voting. You have to put it in the envelope and keep it sealed, and it gets processed with the other ballots. We don't have tabulators there. That's only on election day, because Maine doesn't have what they call true early voting, where you can actually put the ballot into the machine. It's all absentee voting.
So if you haven't received, I'm clearing something up for Janice, who had a question. So if you have not applied for an absentee ballot, can you go to early absentee voting without that ballot and get one there?
Yeah, yes. She doesn't have her ballot yet?
No.
Yes, you can come in and vote there, yes.
Thank you for clearing that up. Appreciate it. We had talked a little bit earlier before we started this event about the work that's required to make sure that there aren't duplicates. Can you talk a little bit about that? I really had no idea the lengths that you go through to make sure there are no duplicate ballots. Whoever wants to start.
Lisa had a point earlier where she said that, you know, I just don't know off the top of my head whether or not somebody has already submitted an application, and it's the same, certainly the same thing for us. So every application that we receive, whether it be online or through the mail, over the phone, whatever it might be, we take that application and we check CBR, the state system, to see whether or not that person has requested an absentee ballot, and it will tell us whether or not that person has already requested one. And that's been something that's happened to a lot, I think, most municipalities this election, just because there have been so many applications that have been sent out by various groups and parties and voters. Go ahead.
We have people that have actually submitted 5 applications. So for each person that has submitted 5 applications, that's 5 times we've checked their record to make sure that they requested one, because we don't know, like Jacob said, we don't know whether they have or not, because we're not going to remember from person to person with all of these coming in at one time. So each time we get any request, we go through the same process as if it was their first one. And we have to hold on to those as duplicate records.
There was also the misconception, you know, more so a couple of weeks ago, where the people who had started requesting their absentee ballots in early August, when the portal first opened up, and people were wondering why they hadn't received their absentee ballots yet when they had requested it back in August. And so those are more phone calls that we were fielding from residents explaining, hey, we don't have the ballots yet. We can't we can't send them to you until we have them. So that was another aspect to it.
We've seen that there are more absentee ballot requests this year than any year in the past. Do you think that voting this way is what the future looks like? And if so, are there ways that we can make it more efficient?
I think that more and more people because this year it's historical, the number of absentees that we will have. I mean, in Bangor, we've already almost reached the number that we had in total for the last presidential. So I see more people feeling comfortable with it as they see how the process works. I don't think we'll ever do away with in-person voting on election day. I think that's, a lot of people really enjoy that. And it's just part of the American way for us. And I just don't see us ever moving completely away and doing like all electronic or something. Me personally, I wouldn't like electronic because I want that paper. I want the paper proof. So Yeah, I can see some people shifting, but I think once COVID is under control and people feel more safe, they like to come out to their community. They know the people at the polls. The workers are your neighbors. They're the ones that you can say, hi, how have you been? I haven't seen you in a year. So it's community. So I don't think we really want to get rid of that.
I see you shaking your head, Jacob. I think you're probably right. It is a community event. Any thoughts to add, Darci?
Yeah, a lot of times I have to warn my election workers, don't keep people hung up too long because they're chatting too long. It's like, we got to keep the lines moving. and that's true. You know, it is the one time a year that they're seeing them and they're catching up on what their grandkids are doing and stuff like that. And, you know, I don't see it ever going away. And, you know, until I became a clerk, I always wanted to be at the polls for that same reason, because it was my community.
I personally love voting in person, and I think I would be very sad if the option was no longer available.
I just wanted to share, I'm not sure if Jacob, Lisa, or Darci are looking at the chat, but I wanted to share a message from Dina. She says, thank you all, Jacob, Lisa, and Darci, and all clerks on board for all the time and energy you're putting in. You're truly dedicated public servants. Well stated. We're getting to the end of our event. Mike, do you have any last questions to round this up?
Yeah, I mean, we haven't talked too much about in-person voting at the polling stations this year. Maybe for unenrolled voters who didn't vote in the primary. Will it look pretty much the same as then? Are you taking any other precautions, or is there anything else going on that you've improved upon, you think, since then, or how are you each looking at that? I know very different polling places here.
I can say in Bangor, it's going to look different because number one, we're splitting our voting list in two. So A through L will be voting in the arena. M through Z are going to be in the conference center ballroom area. So that is going to be different. You know, people will be parking in different areas to get into the building. We've got a trolley that's going to circle the building all day long to transport people around. Just the flow inside is going to be in a different direction. So there's a lot of different changes in Bangor that, you know, we'll have different staging areas and separate rooms so that we can accommodate more people in the building, but still maintain that 50-person limit that we're allowed to. So, you know, it will be different in Bangor.
The one big difference that I'm going to probably take care of this election versus the last election, the primary, the state primary in July, was I'm going to have a couple more people with like information. They're going to be the ones that can direct people, so people aren't getting in lines that they don't need to be there. I did have one person doing that, but I think I need to really concentrate on a little more of that, so people aren't getting in somewhere kind of getting stuck because they're corralled and they go to the right place the first time and nobody's frustrated, and we can move those things along faster with that. But as for the flow and all of that, I've got a pretty small place anyways, big enough for 50 people to be in, and the flow will continue the same. I don't want to throw too much at too many people at one time.
For us, if the flow of voter traffic, we vote in a gymnasium here at one of the local schools. So if somebody did not vote in the July primary, the polling place layout is going to look a lot different, just because we had to establish a one-way flow of traffic where they're going in one door and out a different door, and it actually hadn't been done that way before me, and so that will look different for residents if they didn't vote in July. And also just voter turnout will be a very big difference. We didn't have really long lines in July, but we're certainly anticipating them for November. So that would be a big difference.
Right, and Paul actually sent me a message saying if people are still in line to vote when the polls are supposed to be closed, does that delay in counting the rest of the ballots? Just so everyone knows, if you're in line at 8, you have the right to vote and they will let you in. But certainly if you had a long line, going to 9 o'clock, it would delay, it would delay everything, certainly, right? And
All
are you
right.
expecting these lines? Are you expecting these lines just because of the virus limitations here, or increased turnout generally, or I guess it's both, right?
It is both. It is both. Definitely.
Not to mention just the occupancy restriction that we have with the 50 people.
And you don't anticipate that changing between now and then. I know the governor she did up seated the restrictions on seated, like restaurants can go from 50 to 100 in a lot of cases, but she did not do that for these events when people are moving around. So it looks like we're going to be operating under those assumptions, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Well, that's great. Are there any last minute questions before we say goodbye to Jacob, Lisa, and Darci? You could raise your hand if you wanted me to call on you. I'm happy to do so. Sometimes it's nice to hear a different voice other than ours. Go ahead, Jack. I just asked you to unmute.
Yes, I'm not too clear on what happens to the votes that a candidate who has been eliminated. How's those distributed?
Do you want me to answer that?
Sure, Lisa.
Okay, so if say there were 3 candidates and the third candidate was eliminated, they would look to that person's vote. Who did they vote for in their second choice? So if they voted for candidate number 1 as their second choice, then their vote would be transferred over to candidate 1.
Thank you.
As long as your first candidate is in the race, your vote stays with them. That's the moral of the story with ranked choice voting. There's the simplest way I figured out to explain it, and I've tried it a million ways. So.
That's actually a really good way.
Ranked choice is hard to explain, I think, verbally. The Secretary of State, he issued a video with visuals. I'm a visual learner, and he released a video which I found to be very helpful in regards to ranked choice voting.
Mm-hmm.
I will actually find that video and send it to all of you in my follow-up email tomorrow morning. So you don't even have to do homework and look for it. I'll do it for you. Thank you, all of you, for coming. It's so nice to hear your questions, so nice to see your faces, so nice to listen to Jacob, Lisa, and Darci, who all have very different cities and towns and sizes and how they're handling things, but a great representation for our state. So if you have any other questions, the BDN has a voter guide, which I will also include a link in the follow-up email tomorrow that you might want to check out. And I will also send the recording of this video so you can share it with friends or watch it again if you're so inclined. But thank you to Mike for joining me. It's so nice to have a co-host on these events to sort of break up my questions. Thanks to all of you that sent in questions either during the event or emailing before. I'm going to share all of those with Mike and his team. And we appreciate your time. Jacob, Lisa, and Darci, really appreciate it. I know you're all very busy, and we'll get through this. This is an exciting time. And so if you haven't registered to vote or you need voting information, check for that email tomorrow. And I hope you all have a pleasant evening. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you for having us.